Podcasting with Ceri Jones.
Hi guys, and welcome to this week's podcast. This week's episode, I am joined once more by a guest who has been on my podcast on two past occasions. The episodes have been very popular, so I was really pleased to have him back once more. In the past, we've spoken about his fishing, including the ferox he had at Loch Treig in Scotland, plus his work as a TV presenter, talking about his experience in the South Seas and living in a jungle while filming his documentaries. He's also a successful author, and in this episode we chat about his latest book, The Way of the Hermit, about Ken Smith, a hermit living in the remote highlands of Scotland. And in his words, as anglers, I think there is a little hermit sits inside most of us. Welcome to my chat with Will Millard. Well, it's good to have you back, Will. It's been almost 12 months.
I can't believe that. No, you just said when I turned up at your doorstep, I was like, I cannot believe it's been 12 months since I was last sat down here. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad you came up. So how has your season been?
I think mixed is the word. Like, work's been quite tricky this year. It's been tricky for a lot of people in the kind of like freelance creative industry. So a lot of ups and downs. It's just been quite hard to get out onto the bank. I had quite a good winter. Do you know what? Actually, I had a really good winter. I had a couple of really big taff grayling. That was beautiful.
Oh, you did some grayling?
I did, yeah. Yeah, just trotting the maggots, down in the usual spots. There seemed to be a bigger, better stamp of fish around this winter and just beautifully marked. No one else out there going for them. You get the place to yourself. That was amazing. And then obviously all the winter piking that I do. I mean, I'm a piking obsessive. It must be something in my DNA from growing up in the fens. Like,
I bet.
Yeah. So we had a couple of really good sessions up there on some of the Brecon Beacons reservoirs. One of the most memorable days was sort of in the January, actually. All my family came up and I just got this lovely photograph of, me with like a really nice double figure fish and all my family around me and my best mates and everything, and we're all just there in the lake, and that was just really nice moments like
January.
That, really. Yeah, in January. And then went to France, done a bit of wild carp fishing in a few of the streams around there, the kind of offshoots of the Loire. That was cool, wine, carp fishing, wild rivers.
When you're fishing for the carp, then do you like ledger, or do you keep it simple, or do you got these bait alarms and things?
No, total sight fishing, stalking. It was beautiful. There was the most memorable catch. I found this wild-looking feeder stream that was split in the campsite that we were in, and there was like this 5 foot high fence either side of the bank to stop the kids from obviously going in the water. A bit of a hazard. So I got a couple of camping chairs and managed to vault this fence, and there was this small pod of carp. Like, there was only about 3 or 4 of them, and they were a nice size, real wild-looking dark commons. And they kind of come in and out of the weed. And I over several days, I got them feeding on a little bit of bait, and eventually got them close enough. And it was literally what did I have on the end? Oh, it was 3 grains of sweet corn. 3 grains of sweet corn, completely free-lined. And this dark shape just came out, went down on it, sucked it up. Didn't even realise it was hooked. It's one of those where you kind of like gently flick the rod tip to set the hook, and it still just sat there. And I thought, I don't even think that's in. And then it just bolted, and absolute chaos then. But that was just an amazing moment.
Perhaps it wasn't heavily fished, was it, for it to know?
Oh no one fished it at all.
Oh.
Funnily enough, they had like a fishing lake on site in that campsite, and it was the worst fishing lake I've ever seen. It was full of anglers every single evening, but no one fished the river. It was really weird, and that was by far and away the best fishing in the area. But nobody was interested.
You were saying you fished for the grayling in the winter on the Taff with a maggot. Did you try the fly?
Do you know what? I fished on the fly a little bit later on, the start of the trout season. I managed to get out, and that was nice. I fished at the Edu The wild, it's a wild trout stream that flows into the River Wye just below Bilf Wells.
Right. Yeah.
And that's that. It's great. I mean, it's good because I can kind of hide away from other fly anglers, so they can't see how terrible my casting is. But they're sort of very small brown trout. But that I did do that, just dry fly fishing.
I'll tell you what we'll have to do is when you mentioned that stretch of the Wye, then there's a stretch from the upper Wye from between Rhyder and Bilth. Do you know what? I can't remember the name of the stretch now. When there's a bridge, there's a swing bridge goes over. I was there actually with two guys a couple of weeks ago, Lewis Henry and Terry Bromwell.
Oh, Terry, never.
Yeah. And I went along just to take pictures, I did, for the journal. And they were catching fish left, right and centre. And I did have a few casts then. We swapped rods and swapped the camera with Terry. And it's something I'm going to do now in the next couple of weeks before it goes too cold, because I got to be honest, my motivation goes in the cold. But it'd be nice for us to go. I'll get Terry to come along and we'll have a few hours on the Wye, because he's probably the best river angler I've ever met, hands down.
Oh, I'd love that. That'd be great.
That'd
be really, really good.
Yeah, we'll have to sort that. Well, after both our podcasts, because it's the third time we've done a recording together, I thought I've got to get you back. A couple of reasons. One, because the stories you said have been really, really popular. And at the time, you were actually finishing off, I think you were writing a book, The Way of the Hermit, and you were on the way to wrapping it up. So what I did the last couple of weeks then, well, was it June or July it came out? And I bought the book because the main thing which made me buy it was the story of the birch sap wine. And I thought, is anything else like that in the book? I have got to buy it. And I got to say, I haven't read it all, and you've just looked at where I've marked the page now. I'm probably about over a third of the way through. It's brilliant. What sort of response has it had?
Oh, thank you so much, mate. That means a lot. Do you know what? It's had a great response. I'm so proud of it, and I'm so pleased for Ken as well, the Hermit. Yeah, it's been good. We've had really good reviews. A few of the big sort of dailies have picked up on it as well. So that's been really great. But, I mean, more than anything, just members of the public picking it up and being really moved by it and getting in touch to say how much they love it. And that means the world. And obviously, I'm trying to like put together what people are saying so I can send a letter to Ken so that he actually finds out as well, because it's a little bit tricky because he is legitimately completely off grid. But yeah, it's been great. It's been a really good response so far. So fingers crossed it keeps kind of building a head of steam, really, and hopefully through word of mouth we can get it to as many people as possible.
Does he realise how well it's doing?
No.
He's not going to sort of sell up and go to the city then?
No. I mean, he's got no idea. I mean, he goes out even less now. His health's not great, but I mean, he's also quite happy spending his time, in the cabin and in the local area. The train station that's most local to him that he does occasionally walk up to, they're selling copies. So he has been up and done a little bit of a signing. And a really good mate of mine, David Cowdery, I should give a shout out to him. He's probably one of the best natural history painters in the UK at the moment. Lives out in West Wales. He very kindly painted the most extraordinary portrait of Ken, and they've hung that in the...
I saw that online.
Oh, my goodness. Honestly, the eyes in it just follow you around the room. It's so stunning. So Ken's been up. Well, I carried the painting down to show Ken, and then it's been hung at the train station. And he's been up. Yeah, so he's been up and sold. And he has sold some copies there, which is great. But he's got no idea, obviously, about the wider uptake of it and the fact it's been in all the major newspapers and stuff.
Does he actually fish now?
He doesn't, unfortunately. His eyes aren't great. He struggles to just thread the eyes of the rod, basically. His legs aren't great. And I found out as well that he can't swim, which I couldn't believe, given the places he's gone and the places that he's fished, as well as the rivers and lakes he's fallen into. To not be able to swim is just mad. But Ken, he turned around to me and he said, well, that's why I'm alive, because people that learn how to swim, they start taking more risks. But if you never learn to swim, you're not going to do anything stupid around water, or you take extra special care. But yeah, a bit mad. But no, I mean, goodness me, his angling ability is extraordinary. And he fished, you know, I mean, we spoke before about his Lochtraig record ferox that he caught. But yeah, outside of the loch, I mean, his time in the wildernesses of Canada and Alaska during the kind of late 70s and early 80s were amazing. You know, he was a survivalist living off the land, and he fed himself catching fish.
Yeah.
You know, giant runs of salmon. He was out there for one Canadian winter when it dropped down to like -20, -25. The River Teslin was freezing. He was catching burbot out of an ice hole.
Wow.
Using the heads of grayling, Arctic grayling that he caught to then catch these burbot and then eat them. And really, really skilled angler.
No, the ferox, that's what caught my attention when he had this lovely fish. You actually then, when you were going up to stay with him, doing the research of the book, you went out one day, which on your last podcast you mentioned, you caught a really nice ferox as well, didn't you? And didn't you say as well, earlier on when we were chatting, it's in the same spot as he had his?
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I got back to the cabin, and obviously we were both, you know, over the moon with this fish that I'd just caught, and we figured out through talking about it and exactly where I'd gone down. He said that is the exact same inlet that I'd had the Lochtraig record from, which was like 30 years previously.
Wow.
The exact same spot, and it was pretty much the same water level as well the day that I caught it. You know, so we're talking about a 7-mile long loch here that extends out like a witch's fingertip, full of all of these different inlets and bays and waterfalls. Could have fished anywhere. I happened to be there, and it's the same.
Yeah,
the same.
It's very similar on a
area.
river, isn't it? Where, you know, there's a certain lie where there'll be a good fish, and for some reason, if that fish leaves, whether it's caught or died, another one would take a space. And I've learnt, like with the Corrib with ferox, even though it's in a big expanse of water, there are areas where, like I had my two biggest fish, the 19.5 and the 25, probably within about 40, 50 yards of each other. It was like a year apart. There's obviously something there, you know, in the open water, and obviously they're there for a reason. There's more feed there. So for you to have caught it without knowing it was the same spot, that's mad. And when you fished it, you said you wasn't sure there was any big fish in there anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I'd been told by Ken that they hadn't sort of seen a trout over 4 or 5 pound in weight in years. He said there's this bug, and he had a few photographs that he showed me, and the innards of these fish, they look like scrambled eggs. I'd be fascinated if any of the listeners out there have any idea what it is. Ken speculates that a bug had got into the water shrimp that were living in the loch, and obviously the trout that had eaten those shrimp had then inherited this bug, and it just turned their innards almost inside out, and they just wouldn't survive beyond a few pounds in weight. So to suddenly catch this fish, and it to have been in the same pool as where Ken caught his, and for it to have been the biggest ferox, as far as I know, as any of us know, since he caught one 30 years previously. Well, I don't know, mate. The world works in mysterious ways, doesn't it? There was a lot of serendipity to that, I think.
Another thing I noticed, when I picked up the book, I thought it was just going to be straight in about his life up in Scotland. But he also goes, you know, he mentions his youth from Derbyshire, and then he was almost beaten to death at one stage, and he was given the whole background to himself. And was it British Columbia? He spent a lot of time on the Yukon. I suppose that's why then when he came back, he had to go to somewhere like that. That's the closest we've got to anything wilderness.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, his experiences over there were a baptism of fire for somebody that hadn't got any experience of that at the time. You know, Ken went to the wildest, grandest wilderness that he could think of. You know, and back in the day, you know, there was no internet. You couldn't pick up handbooks. There wasn't Bear Grylls on the television. You know, he just went out there. You know, the first trip he went out for 6 months with one of his best mates. I don't know how they didn't die. They had to face down grizzly bears, mountain lions. They got threatened by a Mountie at one point. Moose, his stories with the moose, absolutely enormous. You can't get your head around it. I mean, you think like, you know, the red deer in Scotland look big, but these moose are on another level. But he did survive, and he became a very, very capable wilderness man. But you mentioned, you know, his early life, and one of the things that a lot of people always ask about is, you know, why do people like Ken, these hermits, these off-gridders, you know, people living on their own in these exceptionally remote environments, what is it that drives them to do it? And quite often it is trauma. And in Ken's case, he was savagely beaten up after a night out in Derbyshire, in the town of Ripley, and he came round from a coma, and he just decided there and then that he would never ever allow someone else to dictate to him the terms of his own life, and that changed him profoundly. And you do when you do encounter people out in the wilderness, sometimes there is a little bit of a trauma that becomes a sliding doors moment where they really feel like they just want to have complete control over their life, and even if it means they have to suffer and be hungry and be wet and be cold and not have a permanent roof over their head, they're going to do it because it gives them back their freedom, their sense of control.
I think more and more recently, more people are getting those thoughts because I watch YouTube a lot, and these sort of videos where people just do that. They do videos of themselves doing it, whereas he just did it himself. There's no record of it then, I suppose. And the reason they're doing it, they're just fed up of being controlled in the system, the bills. It's so easy for people to think, I've had enough. I'm just going. I want to be a hermit, you know. And I can relate to it.
I think especially as anglers, I think there's a little hermit that sits within inside most of us. I think that we like solitude. You know, we choose to be reclusive from time to time. It's almost feels cliched now, but there's certainly times when life gets too much, the first thing we think about going and doing is picking up our rod and heading off up some river somewhere where we can experience that little bit of solitude, even if it's just for a few hours. People like Ken decide to do that full term, and I think you're absolutely right, Ceri. I think that it is growing and growing and growing, and people are getting frustrated with the system, with the trappings of modernity. You know, people are seeing that we are destroying our environment in the way that we live, and it's not making them happy. It's certainly not making them healthy, and people are starting to think, do you know what? Those people that I've always been told are weirdos, you know, the reclusive people, the solitude, the lone wolves, you know, maybe they're not so odd. And when you meet someone like Ken, you realise they're really not. Ken's a very normal person, actually. He's actually quite social, and he lives in a really comfortable way. His cabin is beautiful. I was surprised
because in the book it shows these photographs, and when you think of a hermit, me anyway, I think, someone in a little cabin or a shed, and they haven't got any running water or anything. No comfort then, what we would call comfort. But look at those pictures. He's done a really comfortable. I'd go on holidays there.
Oh, definitely. Absolutely.
And another thing I noticed, it's a log cabin, isn't it? Which he's probably made, I guess.
It blows my mind that he was able to do it on his own. You know, you look at the size of these logs, and he's been able to shift them as one man and to build the structure of his cabin. But yeah, they use this saddle notch technique. Very, very simple. Effectively, you have like a cup shape cut into the corner of one of the logs, and that cup shape receives the log above, and then you cut another cup into that, and so on and so forth, and you just stack them up.
Yeah.
Then you put your roofing material on, cut out your windows and doors, and you're in.
There's like some moss or something in between or something, isn't it?
You'd stuff it up with sphagnum moss, and then you're away. And yeah, he has no running water, which superficially sounds terrible, but in Scotland, where is there not running water? He's got this beautiful burn out the back of his house. There's a little pool down there. He just pipes off a little bit, so he's got a little bit of a tap. He's got this bath, and underneath the bath, he's built like a log burning stove. So he puts logs underneath the bath, fills it up with water from the burn, heats up the bath. He's got his own hot tub with a view of the loch that he sits in. The only problem he had was that he realised that he was using a rubber plug that melted the first time he tried to do it. So he said, I just had to change the plug, and there we go, I'm away. He's got no electricity, but he has a fire, a ready supply of wood. He uses candles in his cabin. He has lots of candles, and then he's got mirrors behind them, which
reflect the light.
Exactly, reflects the light around the cabin. And he's built guest cabins as well. So when his friends come, like me, when I was going and writing the book with him, I'd go and stay in the guest cabin. My wife's been, Ceri. She came as well.
She doesn't mind, does she?
She did mind, because unfortunately one of his friends was staying, so he ended up having to sleep in the store cupboard, and there was 20 dead mice. And some of them were skeletons, some of them were mummified, some of them had liquefied just on the floor. So she wasn't impressed with that. And she was I could tell she was a little bit like, Will's brought me into his world, and he's gone and done all of these backwards things, and I don't want to kind of be the awkward one. And I remember very clearly like looking her in the eye and saying,
"Where's the B&B?" She's asking.
Yeah. And I looked her in the eye and I was like, listen, love, don't think that I don't think that this is not rank for 1 second, as I'm shoveling all these mice into the corner of the room so we can sleep on the floor. But yeah, apart from stuff like that, no, I mean, it's really comfortable. His cabin itself is absolutely lovely, and many, many a good night was spent in there writing this book with him.
And drinking.
Yeah, I had to knock that on the head, to be honest.
You didn't know what you were drinking.
But just that wine.
Yeah. Have you been up since the book has come out?
Yeah, I have. The Sunday Times wanted to send their columnist Robert Crampton to go Hermit and spend a night with Ken. So I took them up there, and we stayed. That was in spring. Ken had a hard winter, actually. He had a hard winter, and his wood supplies were low, and his food supplies were low, and he hadn't really got the garden in the shape that it needed to be. We sort of rolled up the sleeves and helped him out there. But the truth of the matter is Ken is getting old. He's 75, but he's an old 75. His body has taken a battering, obviously, given the way that he lives. And one of the really great things about the book is that hopefully, the little bit of an income that he's going to get from it is going to make his life a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah, he can have Tesco home deliveries. That would be funny. Yeah. When you see a Tesco van come outside. Is there a road that goes to it?
No, there isn't. I mean, but one of the things. So he's on an. I mean, obviously, most of Scotland is part of various Scottish estates. So he is on a Scottish estate. He sought permission to build the cabin, which I wrote about in the book. But they really love him up there, and they do look after him. And there is a bit of a. It's sort of like a stone track. They can get their 4x4s when they're working on the estate, and then you get to his wood. There's not a pathway through there, but they can get close enough. So basically now, they're able to send a woodsman down to cut his wood for him, which is great. And they also take him food as well from time to time. So, it's fingers crossed he's going to kind of be able to, for as long as he wants to, stay where he loves.
Yeah, that to me, I would love the idea of going and do a photographic project on how he's living,
Yeah.
That would be like right up my street. There's a couple of places I've got in my head already for Ireland, and hopefully if all things come together, because there's lots of people, some characters you meet when you go to these places. But in the fishing season, when I go there, it's normally anything between April to September. Even though I want to do this, meet these different people and photograph them and chat and do podcasts, in the fishing season, really speaking, I want to go fishing. So now the fishing season's finishing now in the next couple of days, actually, in Ireland. I'm going to go in October, November and just do like a photographic journey, and meet people like this. I love that, just talking to them, Some of these stories they come out with, it's like gold.
Oh, yeah. Extraordinary.
One of the things as well I picked up on, because I light a lot of fires when I'm fishing to cook some food. One of the tips he said in there as well is for if you want a less intense heat, if a fire's going really fast, pull the logs apart so you get a gap in the centre. I didn't even think of that.
No, nor had I. So he picked this up from the indigenous peoples in the Yukon, I think it was, and it was when he was. Ken spent a period where he just walked off into the wilderness with effectively nothing. He had like a billhook, a pot, a small bag of sugar, a little bit of flour for making bannocks, a tarpaulin, and a fishing rod, and that was basically it. But he did encounter indigenous peoples when he was walking through their land, and they taught him this method of fire building, a star fire they called it, and you arrange the logs in a star formation, and then you control the burn by moving the logs in and out for a more intense or less intense heat. And obviously as well, it meant that you wasted less wood. As soon as your water or food or your fish that you'd stuck on a spit was cooked, you'd pull the logs apart and you wouldn't use that fuel up, as opposed to doing what we do, which is pile the wood on top. As soon as your food's cooked, you've taken it off, but the fire still keeps roaring and you've burned through all of that wood, don't you?
Yeah.
So it was interesting, and he learned a lot of lessons from the people of that land, and it undoubtedly helped him out. It made him the man he became.
Do you feel a bit lost now? You spent a lot of time putting this book together. When it's out there, I bet you feel a great feeling, and then you've got to start selling it, obviously, and that's another job again. Do you feel that, have you written, I've got some ideas now to write another book? Would you like to take time out now?
I mean, I can't afford to take time out, and this is where it is difficult. And I do feel a bit lost at times. I always feel a bit lost after my projects. They take so much out of me physically and emotionally, because I really care about the people that I work with and help to tell their stories. It takes a little part of you, whether it's working with the Bajau in Indonesia. I always think about that family that I stayed with 10 years ago now, my first Hunters of the South Seas project, or, the brothers that I stayed with when I was in the Korowai in Papua, living in the tree houses out in the swamps with them in New Guinea. And now through to Ken, the Hermit of Ceri, writing this book, The Way of the Hermit. And you get to the end, Ceri, and you're just like, got to start again now. Like, find someone else and tell their story. And I know, I don't want people to feel sorry for me, because it's like, do you know what I mean? I'm not stacking beans and working in the factories anymore like I used to. But equally, it is hard to keep finding remarkable people. They are exceptional human beings, and they don't come across every every day. You don't come across them every day, so it does make it difficult to find them. And then when you do find them, you start to think, you never know where you're going to find your next story. Sometimes it is people that you meet in the pub and chats, but sometimes it's more conventional. And this time I was it was a Glasgow Film Festival, and this independent film had been entered called The Hermit of Ceri, which I encourage everybody to watch. It's absolutely incredible. Made by a local Scottish filmmaker called Lizzie Mackenzie, who actually taught herself how to film so she could film Ken's life. And in it, you see this remarkable character, but I also noticed that he was keeping a diary, and he actually has written a diary every day since the age of 5.
Has he?
Yes. So I was using not only his spoken word when I'd go up and interview him, I had and have at my house now all of his diaries from the age of 5 to 75. Handwritten, which is a hell of a responsibility to have them all. And they're piled high. I mean, there's probably 2 to 3 million words, I would say, in them. And I've read it all.
And he still continue to write?
Yeah, he does. I mean, he struggles. His eyesight's not great, as I said before. So he does struggle. He does struggle to write.
I bet you just pick at random a certain day and just read it. And I bet it's like incredible to think what's going through his mind.
Absolutely. You read, it's in the book, but there's a time where he's run out of a bothy because of this poltergeist, this ghost, and you read it in his diary. And whether you believe in ghosts or not, that sense of fear, that visceral fright comes through in his words. There's just this shaky handwriting, and it says, "Have you ever felt fear?" ? And then he literally ran for 18 miles through a Scottish winter in a snowdrift through the middle of the night. And then there's superstorms that he faces down where all the trees in the forest are crashing around the cabin, and he flees out and he runs up into the train line, which is above his house, and he goes and runs into this train tunnel, and the wind is so strong that it's almost like throwing him off his feet. And then you read about these things whilst the events are unfolding around him. and it's almost more powerful than film.
That's in the book then. I got it. I can't wait to finish this.
You need
now.
to hurry up, mate. I'm looking at this now, guys. He's only about a third of the way through.
So now this is out there. Have you got anything else in your head now? Your next project?
The next one that's going to be coming out is a book called My First Day Fishing. And basically, I think I've noticed, like many of us, I mean, I can't even believe I'm even saying older anglers now because I'm only 40, but you realise that even growing up in the 80s, that things were very different back then. And a lot of us were taught by a parent or a grandparent how to fish, whereas a lot of kids today don't have that opportunity. So what I wanted to do is write this children's book going back to how it was to be taught by my granddad to fish, and to almost kind of take a young person by the hand and talk them through the very basics of our sport. So that's going to be coming out with Magic Cat, hopefully in spring of next year. And yeah, I mean it's how to fish, but then also it's watercraft. It teaches them about fish themselves as animals. It's written.
Oh,
yeah.
so you've done it.
I finished it. Yeah, so it's just kind of tidying it up now. I've had to work with an illustrator, and you always work with people that don't fish, so you're kind of like, no, you've put the reel on back to front there, or you've labelled a carp as a barbel, and grayling have got red tinged fins, all of this kind of stuff. Lovely things to kind of to work on. But yeah, I'm really excited to see that go out into the wild.
When you put these books together, like this one, for instance, The Way of the Hermit, have you got an actual deadline which you have to reach, or do you come to a stage where you think, no, that's not quite right, and then I want to change it, and you keep going? And what's it like when you think then, right, I'm not going to keep changing it now, this is it?
It's really hard. There's an old line in writing that your book is never finished, you just get to the day it has to be handed in. And I'm afraid that's true. It's a book like The Way of the Hermit, with the archive of Ken's life, plus Ken himself, plus the responsibility. You could go on forever, but at some point you have to just be like, no, that's good enough. That's got to go in now.
I guess with all the diaries which he's written, there's room for another book.
Oh, I mean, he says that. Yeah, you could easily write 10 books on the story of Ken's life, and some of the stuff that hasn't made the cut. I mean, you just like, I can't believe I'm covering that in a line.
Yeah. So I guess now that the book is out there, and you've more or less said there's another one on the way which is written, does this leave any more time now for you to go fishing? Have you got anything planned to fish now this year?
Do you know what? I mean, I'm looking forward to coming into the winter now. The last couple of projects that I've got going on, touch wood, were going very badly, but are now going very well. So I'm hoping that I might actually start to get back out there again. So we've got the winter pike season coming now, which I absolutely love. So I'll definitely be heading out onto the reservoirs. I really, really want to catch a pike on the fly this year if I can. Need to do a little bit of investment of the gear, unfortunately, because I haven't got anything. But fly fishing for pike now is getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
It is, isn't it?
And it looks so cool. Like the takes that you see them, when the pike hits that fly, it just looks ferocious. So I'd love to give that a go. I'll definitely be going back onto the grayling at some point as well. And then I guess just resetting for the spring, really.
What I plan to do now in the next couple of weeks, hopefully, is do this grayling fishing, or maybe we can get in touch with Ceri for us to go, the three of us to go. But I want to get a bass. I haven't had a bass this year. I haven't fished for them.
Yeah, no, I've not had a bass this year either. I mean, I moved to the coast, and I've done a handful of sessions, just straight into the Severn Estuary, basically with big baits and things. But it's ridiculous that I haven't been out on the. I was absolutely sure that I was going to be bass, and this year it seems to have been really, really good actually for bass. There's been some big ones coming out.
Have been. Yeah. On the spinners and whatever plastics, soft plastics.
Soft plastics. Some people have had them on the flies as well around. I mean, you can't say specific locations, otherwise you won't make it home. have your tyres slashed. But yeah, I mean, some of the places around, where we live here in South Wales, has been absolutely fishing its head off.
I won't do nothing to your tyres. You can tell me. I won't tell anyone. Well, many thanks for coming up, and I'll have to get you to sign this book for me, actually. What's the best way for listeners to get hold of a copy of your book?
Well, you can go onto Amazon, of course, The Way of the Hermit. You can pick it up there. You can pick it up at any bookshop. We'll order it in for you. It's in Waterstones. Or if you would like a signed copy, you can get in touch with me through my social media. I'm on all the usual places: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and I'm sure I'll be able to sort you out. So anywhere, basically.
Well, many thanks, Will. Hopefully we'll get out in the next couple of weeks and try to catch some fish.
Sounds perfect.
If you've enjoyed this podcast and want to listen to more, please consider becoming a Patreon, where you'll get weekly podcasts and access to over 140 episodes, behind-the-scenes photography to go with each episode, plus other exclusive content and prizes. To become a Patreon, visit patreon.com/casting with Ceri Jones, or you can find the link on my website, castingwithcerijones.com. That's all for now. In tight lines, and may they always be up in the wave.